Is this the cutest doll I've ever made? Yes. Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel, and a very warm welcome if you're new. I have a very exciting video for you guys today. If you watched my previous video where I unboxed a bunch of goodies from Spain, you'll know that today is a collab with a group of doll friends. Our theme is candy, and we had a Secret Santa style box swap where we sent each other supplies to make our dolls with. We didn't initially plan it this way, but after some schedule changes, we all agreed a candy themed collab would still work well with Easter. For my doll, I knew I wanted something soft and pastel colored, so I chose marshmallow swirls as my candy inspiration. But I also wanted to incorporate a new passion of mine, Fairy Kei. Fairy Kei is a Japanese street fashion that originated in the Harajuku district in the early 2000s. It's an offshoot of a sister style called Spank Kei, and has a dreamy, ethereal feeling to it with a soft color palette. It also takes a lot of inspiration from 80s fashion. You can see why I think it lends itself so well to a candy theme. The outfits worn in Fairy Kei typically include a triangular silhouette, layering, and a variety of textures and details. It's supposed to make the wearer look like they could drift away into a dreamy, sleepy, magical world at any moment. I'll link some resources below so you can learn more about it if you're interested. It's really great. For my character, here's what I came up with. I used the twisty marshmallows as a motif and color scheme, and let myself be inspired by Fairy Kei for the rest of her look. She's going to have a layered outfit in the colors mint green, pink, yellow, and white, with a floofy jacket and a purse to match. There's a wide range of sub-styles within the fashion, like fancy style, spank, boy style, but for the purpose of this video I stuck to classic Fairy Kei in my concept. I'm very excited about this one, so let's waste no time and get right into it. Off to the work table! I chose to use this Briar beauty doll for a base. She has some stains here and there, but I like her skin tone, and Ever After High faces work well for Asian dolls in my opinion. Let's start by getting rid of the old hair. I soak her in some freshly boiled water to soften her head. Then gently wiggle and squish the vinyl to get it off the neck peg. Her neck ended up a little cracked, but that's nothing I can't fix with super glue. To get the hair out, I take the smaller end of a metal cuticle pusher to scrape around on the inside of the scalp. This pulls all the plugs into the head, and we can extract them with a pair of tweezers. Or, scissors, apparently. Once the hair is removed, I use some tissue soaked in acetone to remove the factory face-up. All clean! I left the brown factory paint on her scalp though, because I plan on giving her the same hair color. I also cut the neck peg smaller to make it easier to replace her head later. It's very common to have natural hair colors in Fairy Kei, so the brown yarn I got in my box is perfect. I start by measuring out the length of yarn I want, then cut double that plus a little extra. I keep cutting bits of yarn to this length until I have a nice hank to work with. Next, I tie the strands to this little metal coat hanger like so. Once the hanger is full, I begin unraveling the yarn. This can take a little while, but it makes brushing the yarn out much easier and you lose less of the fibers. It actually looks really pretty just like this, but I have something else in mind. To brush it out, I use a pet brush and start from the bottom before working my way up. I save the leftover fluff in a little baggie for future projects. Once brushed, the fibers are a bit frizzy, so let's remedy that by straightening them. This smooths them out and makes them silky. Before we reroute her, I mark off where I want her middle part to go. Then I cut the yarn from the hanger bit by bit and separate a little strand to reroute. At the very end of the strand, I slip it onto the eye of my rerouting tool before squishing it into the head. Rerouting is not the most exciting part of customizing, so I always make sure I have a few videos lined up to entertain myself while I do this. I started by rerouting her fringe and the little strands by her ears first, and then I went back and plugged thoroughly all the way around the hairline and the part. Because she's going to have ponytails, I didn't plug on the inside as I didn't want it to become too thick. Yarn is great for doll hair, but you're limited to a certain length, and I want her hair longer than this, so let's make her some extensions. I take a piece of thin yarn, and I made some wefts in advance using the same yarn as before. This I cut into smaller wefts, before using some all-purpose tacky glue to adhere them to the piece of yarn. I start at the end and wrap the weft around it. This is kind of the same method I used to make Ichigo's tail. I continue like this, going weft by weft and working my way up until I get this. I left a piece exposed at the end because I want to root it into the head. So first, I widen the hole using a thick embroidery needle. Then I slipped a piece of yarn onto my tool and stabbed that into the head quickly before the hole closes back up. And voila! Doll extensions! With both sides done, I used that same glue to secure all the new plugs on the inside of the head. Now let's set her aside to dry so we can start work on her outfit. I'm gonna use the supplies Lucia sent me, as well as a few bits and bobs of my own. I made her a simple turtleneck pattern with the plastic wrap and tape method, and cut the pieces from a soft white knit fabric. Let's take these to my sewing machine to sew them, shall we? First, we're gonna sew the bodice pieces together at the shoulder seams, right sides facing. Then, I sew the neck of the turtleneck to the neckline of the bodice piece in the same way. The sleeves get sewn to the shoulder seams, also with right sides facing. It's a bit finicky, but I just use a lot of pins to keep them in place. I added some darts to the bust, and now we have a weird white octopus. But don't worry, once you sew up the side seams, it should look like this. Tiny little turtleneck. I left some extra fabric in the back so we can add a closure, so I hemmed that and the bottom of the shirt. To finish it off, I sew a snap to the back of the neck and one to the bottom of the shirt. It gaps a little bit in the middle, but I think the layering piece will fix that. Speaking of which, for her baby doll, I drew up a simple pattern with 2 cups and 2 rectangles that will be gathered. I cut the pieces from different colors of sparkly mesh. Besides the cups, I cut everything double to saturate the colors a little bit. First, I sew a gathering stitch along the length of the green mesh. If you sew it on a piece of paper, the machine won't eat it up, and you get to rip it in a very satisfying way to get it off. I then take one strand of the thread and pull it to gather the fabric. Once it's the same length as the pink rectangle, I sew them together. I've been trying to improve my machine sewing skills after my last project, so I'm taking extra care and unpicking the gathering thread for a neat finish. I cut off the excess fabric before turning the ruffle and top stitching it to help it stay in place. Now I can gather the pink fabric as well. I sew that to a thin ribbon, which will act as a closure, and cut off the excess there as well. You're essentially making a shiny apron. Both cups get a tiny dart down the middle to give them a rounded shape like this. I sewed some ribbons around them as well, and pinned them in place while they're on the doll before sewing. For her skirt, I want to use all these colors. I'm going for a kind of candy stripe look. I cut a waistband from darker pink fabric, and cut rectangles for the skirt and ruffles. About 2 of each color should look nice. I also cut a piece of elastic that's the same length as the width of her hips. Then I start sewing the rectangles of the skirt together. Eventually, I have one long rectangle like this. I do the same thing with the ruffle of the skirt and fold it in half. It also needs to be gathered to the length of the skirt piece, so I do that and try my best to line the colors up before sewing them together. This also gets top stitched down to keep it in place. After one more gathering session, the skirt gets sewn to the waistband. And finally, I sew up the back seam, but leave the waistband untouched. This is so that I can slip the elastic band into it. Now I just need to sew the elastic pieces together, and we have a cute little skirt. To make sure it stays in place, I sew a ribbon on the inside to catch her crotch. And finally, for her hoodie, I purchased Dollightful's oversized hoodie pattern. However, I want a bunny hoodie with puffier sleeves, so I adapted the pattern pieces for those. Most of the pieces are cut from the super fluffy white fleece Lucia sent me, but I did cut some pieces from the colored cotton to match her skirt. Let's start with her ears. I begin by sewing the pink and yellow cotton to the outside of 2 of the ear pieces with a tight zigzag stitch. Then I sew the other ear pieces together with the right sides facing. They were a bit difficult to turn, but with enough finagling I managed it. Cute! For the hood, I sewed these 2 pieces together at the curved edge. Then, right sides facing, I pinned the hood trim to it, making sure to add her ears in between. Although, I should have put them in a more upright position. I mean, they look fine that way, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm fine. I sewed a dart down the middle, which helped position them a bit better. Next, I gather her sleeves and sew them to the cuffs. Then, I sewed the pockets to the bodice pieces and add a cotton trim instead of a zipper. From there, I follow similar steps to how I sewed her shirt. First the shoulder seams, then the sleeves, then the hood, and sew up the side seams. I finished the hem by adding some of the mint cotton. This was a super easy pattern to follow, so I highly recommend buying it if you want to make cute doll hoodies. On the back, I sew a lollipop shape, which we'll add detail to later. The inside doesn't look very good, but we'll just turn a blind eye, okay? I made her some leg warmers by sewing what are essentially yellow tubes. Let's try them on the doll. Yeah, that looks cute. For her socks, I did something similar, but instead of a tube, they're shaped to match her legs and feet. I cut off the excess, and they look like this. Her clothes are looking great so far, but let's decorate them even more. Because I want the marshmallow candy theme to be clear in this doll's design, I'm gonna make some clay decorations. I use Sculpey polymer clay and mix a minty color using my new pasta machine. This helps to soften and mix the color together. I did the same with the pink and the yellow. And with all these colors, we can start. I use my clay extruder to extrude little worms, some bigger and some thinner. Then, careful not to squish the clay too much, I attach the 4 colors together like this. I want them to stick together, but I don't want to lose the rounded shape of the worms. Then I twist them around to make the marshmallow swirl. I made a few different sizes and cut them into smaller marshmallow-sized pieces. While I have my clay out, I also make her little Tamagotchi friend. This is to harken back to the retro inspiration of Fairy Kei. I make a hole down the middle of the egg shape so that I can attach it easily later and add some details. After baking them in the oven for half an hour, they came out like this. I also made some marshmallow swirl lollipops while I was at it. Let's add them to the clothes. I make little bows by sewing strips of ribbon together like this and wrapping the thread around it to keep it in place. I sew one in pink and one in mint to the pockets of her hoodie. Using some thread and pom-poms, I mimic the look of laces. And I glue some of the smaller marshmallows to the bows. To decorate her baby doll, I'm adding these little nail art ribbons because I thought the shine matched the mesh fabric really well. A pink one in the middle and 2 smaller blue ones on the straps. I also made her some earrings using more nail art decorations and jewelry wire. These pink milk bottle lids were so cute, I decided to use them to make her bag. To attach them together, I'll use a piece of mint fabric like this. I hemmed the edges so it looks nice, and did the same with 2 pieces of pink fabric. Then I take my all-purpose tacky glue and cover the length of the mint strip. I carefully line up the lids, and then glue them together like so. This will act as a hinge so the bag can open. While that dries, I cut circles from my white fleece again so we can make her bag fluffy. Gluing them in place over the mint fabric also adds extra stability. I don't want it to open too far or for the contents of the bag to fall out though, so I'm gluing the pink strips on the inside like this. Using a marker, I make little dots where I want her strap to attach and use my hand drill to make holes. I also drilled 2 holes at the top. I pick out one of the mint beads from this great stash Lucia sent me, and use a piece of jewelry wire with a catch at the end to attach it to the bag. On the opposite side, and with the help of a needle, I feed through a loop of pink and white thread so it can close like this. I feed a pink bead through a length of regular thread to catch on the inside of the hole. This thread will form the bag strap. Then I use some of these pretty seed beads and a thin needle to feed them onto the thread. Once we have enough on there for the length we want, we can feed the thread through the opposite hole in the bag and use another bigger bead to secure it in place. That's looking great! I add a jewelry wire with a catch to the Tamagotchi and bend the wire into a loop at the top so I can attach it later. Then, I decorate her bag with some of the marshmallows, a pink bow, and a yellow pom-pom. And I finish it off by adding some beaded charms. I also made her a long necklace. No! And a little bracelet. To make her shoes, I put her socks on and wrap her legs in plastic and masking tape. Then, with some more of the clay I mixed earlier, I create a triangular heel shape like this. I put them on her feet, making sure to mold them around the toes and heel a bit. I also make her stand up in them so I know they'll have the right angle for her to stand. I fashion some toe covers with half-moon shaped bits of clay and make sure to blend them into the heel. I added an extra piece for the sole and make little strips to attach to the front of the shoe like this. Sneakers often have this little section of texture for some reason, so I like to add it to my shoes too. Once attached, I use a cuticle tool and add the crisscross texture and the line going from that all around the heel. Once done, they look like this. I bake them and add felt for the body of the shoe, then use this thread as lacing to secure them to the feet. Phew, that was a lot. Let's get back to the doll, shall we? I really want her to show a peace sign, so I'm using the same method as in my last video to mod one of her hands. I start by cutting the 2 fingers in the middle to separate them. Once I've done that, I dunk the hand into some boiling water for a few seconds to soften it. This lets me bend the fingers down, and I hold them in place while dunking the hand into some ice water to set the shape. They kept springing back though, so I used a drop of super glue on each fingertip to attach them to the palm of the hand permanently. Perfect! With all that done, and her head attached again, we can bundle up the hair to protect it and take the doll outside for a spray of sealant. At this point, our weather was humid and cloudy, but I'm happy to report the sealant behaved well regardless. I start by blushing her face with some pink and red soft pastels, focusing on her temples, cheeks, forehead, chin, and nose. I also extended the blush on her cheeks into her eyes, which is something I've seen in a lot of J-fashion makeup looks. I also blush her lips using a little sniper brush. Keeping my concept art close by for reference, I start sketching the details of her face with a watercolor pencil in a color close to her skin. This makes it easier to remove any mistakes if I need to. I want her to be smiling, so I extend the lines of her mouth further than the mold. I also give her a cute cheek dimple on one side. Then, referencing some pictures of real Japanese women off camera, I attempt to draw a closed Asian eye and eye folds. I also sketch in where I want her eyebrows to go. I'm drawing them kind of high up on her face because I think that helps her look more open and friendly, as opposed to a furrowed brow, you know? And I add the placement for her cheek stickers. I got these pastel colored pan pastels a while ago and thought this is the perfect time to use them, since I want her eyeshadow to be light in color but still saturated. I fade that from pink to mint. After another spray of sealant, we can build up the colors of her face. I add another layer of pastels to her eyelids and use them to fill in her cheek hearts as well. Then I take my dark brown pencil to draw some individual eyebrow hairs and darken the outer lines of her lips and her dimple. I use a dark pinkish purple to add more details around her lips. Once the lines have been darkened, I use white to add highlights to her nose, Cupid's bow, under eyes, and around her brows. At this point though, I was eager to switch to acrylic paints. I mix some pretty pastel shades in yellow, pink, and mint, and get to work. With my tiniest brush, I use a darker pink to fill in her lips. I use that same pink for the darker pink section of her eyeshadow, trying my best to fade it into the pastels. I use a lighter pink for her inner eyelids and an in-between shade to blend them together. Then I do the same with the mint, saturating her eyeshadow and blending it in as best I can. With my dotting tool, I add 2 dots to form the top of the hearts on her cheeks, and use my brush to make the point. With the pastel yellow, I carefully line above her lashes. The pink heart was a bit too dark, so I redid it in a lighter pink. And her lips were a bit too light, so I go over them again in a darker pink. With a dark brown, I very carefully enhanced the individual eyebrow hairs I drew. I also accentuate the lines of her lips, and add some more of the detail that got lost during painting. To highlight her face, I mix a color a few shades lighter than her skin tone. Like before, I add highlights around her eyebrows, nose, under eyes, and lips. Now we can finish her eyes. I used black to darken her lashes, and her face-up is done. But what about her nose band-aid, you may ask? I cut a little band-aid shape out of mint fabric and glued that to her nose. Then I used my paint to add details. I gave her a teeny tiny manicure with paints as well. To finish off her accessories, I paint the screen of her Tamagotchi grey. I was going for a pixelated heart here, but I ended up accidentally giving it a very derpy face instead. Which I'm not mad about, to be honest. I also used my acrylics to paint the details on the back of her jacket and the lines on her socks. Her shin gets another band-aid, this time in pink. I don't know why I like these so much, but I think it has something to do with making her seem a little clumsy, and that makes her cuter to me. Oh, I almost forgot to gloss her lips. With her face up done, we can take out the pins and unwrap the burrito. Oh my gosh, I love her already. I comb her hair out and tie it into ponytails, but it needs some more styling to make it look pretty. So I heat a metal butter knife using my straightener. I use this to help the hair lay flatter around her face. I also heat up a metal chopstick to give her fringe a subtle flip and to curl the little tendrils at the sides of her face. Then I can just snip them to the right length. I add some tiny hairbands in the same colors as her cheek hearts to help her ponytail stand up a bit more. This also gives us something to glue her hair accessories to. I poke holes in her earlobes with a needle to add her earrings, and adorn her ponytails with a bunch of cute accessories. Now all we need to do is dress her up and she's done. So, what do you think? I wasn't joking when I said this is probably the cutest doll I've ever made. I think she's my new favorite. I've wanted to make a candy themed doll for such a long time, probably for over a year now, so I'm really happy to have been part of this collab. I think a good name for our Fairy Kei cutie is Mitsu. It's a Japanese name often given to girls, and it can mean the sweetness you get from honey, which I think is perfect for a candy themed doll. I forgot to film it, but I glued bows to her little sneakers, and I think it really ties the look together. I ended up foregoing the necklace though, because her bag strap already kind of adds enough visual interest to the top half of her body. I also ended up giving her bag a closure on the one side to make it easier to put on and take off. What I really love about this doll is how much I enjoyed her process. It was one of the few times that I had enough time to do every part of the project without rushing it, and that makes such a difference for me. I think my passion for Fairy Kei also shines through, or at least I hope it does. This was completely by accident because we were originally going to release our videos earlier in the month, but I think I accidentally made her an Easter bunny. I don't mind, but it's a funny coincidence. I'm really proud of this project and the quality I managed to achieve in her clothes. I'm sure to all you seamsters and seamstresses out there it must look amateurish, but to me this is the best I've managed so far. What did you think of Mitsu? Let me know in the comments down below. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you love Mitsu as much as I do. In fact, I love her outfit so much, I kind of want to steal it for my mini-me. If you liked this video and you think I deserve it, please leave a like or a comment for me below. It's free, and it's one of the very best ways to support creators here on YouTube. I also want to thank every single subscriber who watches until the end of my videos. I'm trying to work my way up towards the next milestone in terms of watch hours, so staying tuned until the end really helps me out. And if you haven't yet and don't want to miss my other videos, you can subscribe to my channel. It warms my heart every time. Also, don't forget to go check out the amazing dolls my friends made. In this collab we have Stitchwick Creations, Lucia's Strange Universe, Everything Eden, Insanely Creating, Shelby KG, and Heliophobian dolls. Please go show their videos and their channels some love. They're all super talented. In my next video, I'll be answering some of your questions. So if you don't want to miss that when it comes out, boop that subscribe button, stick around, and as always, stay golden. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.